By 1811, Napoleon Bonaparte governed more of the European continent than any leader since the Roman emperors. He spent a decade humiliating the continent's greatest monarchies, redrawing national borders at will, and installing his own siblings on foreign thrones. These victories were built on a specific tactical style. Instead of relying on raw mass, Napoleon used speed, surprise, and surgical maneuvers to isolate and destroy his enemies. This mastery of the battlefield created a sense of inevitability around his rule, fueled by a desire for total control over every aspect of European life. However, one nation remained outside his grasp: the United Kingdom. Because Britain was an island defended by the world's most powerful navy, the French army had no way to cross the English Channel. Napoleon's military genius was stopped at the water's edge. To bypass this physical barrier, he pivoted to a different kind of warfare. If he couldn't invade London, he would bankrupt it through a total economic embargo. This shift moved the continent's most successful general into a theater he didn't understand. He was now attempting to win a war through trade mechanics rather than battlefield tactics. He called it the Continental System. It was a massive coast-to-coast blockade designed to collapse the British economy. The policy was absolute. Every nation under Napoleon's influence was forced to stop buying British goods, effectively shattering centuries-old trade routes. But the system ignored a basic reality. The European mainland relied on British goods and capital to function, turning the blockade into a form of self-imposed economic starvation. This 1812 map shows the scale of the demand. Every territory in green and yellow, stretching from Spain to the borders of Russia, was expected to uphold this trade ban regardless of the cost to their own people. Instead of crippling Britain, the blockade became a trap for Napoleon's allies, fueling a resentment that threatened to fracture his empire from within. Russia was the most significant of these struggling allies. Though Tsar Alexander I had initially agreed to the blockade, the cost quickly became unbearable. Without British trade, the Russian economy began to stall. This infuriated the Russian nobility, who saw their wealth evaporating to support a French policy they never wanted. To prevent an internal revolt and save his treasury, the Tsar eventually ignored Napoleon's orders and reopened his ports to British merchant ships. For Russia, this wasn't a play for power. It was a necessary act of survival against a trade policy that was actively destroying their country. Napoleon refused to see the economic logic behind the Tsar's decision. He viewed the reopening of trade as a personal betrayal that could only be answered with military force. To punish Russia, he abandoned the very tactics that had made him successful. He set aside speed and agility in favor of a campaign built on pure, overwhelming mass. This chart shows the result of that shift. He assembled the Grand Army, a force of over 600,000 men. It was the largest invasion force Europe had ever seen, designed to intimidate the Tsar into submission. In his rush to project power, Napoleon built a force so large it was impossible to feed. He had created a slow-moving target that depended on a level of supply and logistics that the era simply could not provide. As the Grand Army crossed into Russia in the summer of 1812, their sheer numbers gave them an illusion of invincibility. But the Russian landscape was unlike anything they had conquered in Central Europe. It was a vast, unforgiving territory that grew more difficult to navigate with every mile they marched. The Russian army refused to meet Napoleon in a decisive battle. Instead, they retreated deeper into their own territory, burning their own crops and villages to ensure the French found nothing but scorched earth. Napoleon was now trapped in a war of attrition. His massive army, built for intimidation, began to starve in a landscape that offered no resources and no end in sight. The destruction of the Grand Army was the inevitable conclusion of a leader who prioritized a failing trade embargo over military logic, leading him to seek total control over a nation that chose to burn itself rather than submit. In June of 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte launched 600,000 men across the Russian border. He anticipated a brief campaign. The plan relied on engaging the Russian army in a decisive battle, crushing their forces and compelling the Tsar to surrender within weeks. This confidence rested on a single fatal assumption: that he could force Russia to fight a traditional European war on his own terms. Popular history often attributes Napoleon's defeat to a single freezing culprit: the brutal Russian winter. Napoleon's collapse was a psychological failure, triggered by a mindset that refused to account for the reality of the Russian environment. He suffered from an illusion of control, the belief that his military brilliance could dictate reality, regardless of the terrain or the will of the people. His inflexible demand for a conventional victory and his reliance on traditional logistics to achieve it directly triggered his own destruction. When the invasion began, the Russian army refused to engage. Instead of fighting, they retreated deeper into their own territory. As they withdrew, they employed a scorched earth strategy, intentionally destroying anything that might be useful to the invading French. They burned their own crop fields, leveled villages, and ruined stockpiles, systematically eliminating all usable food and shelter. Every mile the French advanced, they found nothing to forage. This starved the soldiers and their horses, creating immense logistical strain on an army built for rapid movement. Napoleon reacted by pushing harder. He forced his starving men further into the interior, desperate to catch the retreating army and force the major battle he needed. His need for a traditional victory blinded him to the fact that he was marching his men into a manufactured void. The damage inflicted on the Grande Armée during the summer and autumn march was catastrophic. This chart tracks advance against troop count. As distance increases, the active soldier line drops dramatically from starvation and exhaustion. Sections highlight causes. Thousands died from disease, and thousands deserted. By the first snowfall marker, surviving troops hover near zero. The data proved the invincible army was effectively dead long before the first freezing temperatures arrived. Napoleon finally reached Moscow, assuming that capturing the capital would guarantee a formal surrender. Instead, he found an empty city. Shortly after the French arrived, massive coordinated fires broke out, and the capital was engulfed in flames. Napoleon sat in the smoldering ruins for weeks, waiting for a peace treaty offer from the Tsar that never came. The silence of burning Moscow proved that military power is useless when the enemy simply refuses to acknowledge it. When the temperatures finally dropped below freezing, the starving army began a devastating retreat across hundreds of miles of previously destroyed land. Soldiers froze where they stood. As they struggled through the ice, Russian cavalry units harassed and attacked the weakened columns relentlessly. Men resorted to eating horse meat, boiled leather, and even candles to survive. The retreat culminated in the mass casualties at the Berezina river crossing, where thousands died in the chaos. Winter provided the final, brutal blow to an army that Napoleon's own hubris had already hollowed out. Of the 600,000 men who marched into Russia, fewer than 100,000 returned. As the survivors limped home, the long-held myth of Napoleon's invincibility shattered across Europe. His enemies united, and within 2 years, Paris fell. Napoleon was forced to abdicate his throne. Napoleon's empire collapsed because he tried to impose rigid control over a vast nation willing to burn everything rather than kneel.